Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. April 15th used to be a red light and siren sort of a day. Everybody would have to run out and file their income taxes, assuming you were making enough money to either to pay income taxes or making too little money to actually be paying income taxes like the little people do. I don't know. So some great swath of the middle of us, I guess, would be filing our taxes now, but we have a extension until 2027 or something like that. I guess a couple of months extension. I'm not paying attention to it. I will. I'll be aware of it when it's coming up again. And the deadline, I think, is bumped back to, I don't know. I don't even know. July? Is that right? I actually ought to get the real information about that. What I know is it isn't today. And that means you don't have to run out of here and go file your taxes rather than stick around and listen to the show. Although, if you felt the need to go and do that because of, I don't know what, habit, patriotism, just want to get all the goddamn stuff off of your desk, whatever it is, you can always come back and listen to the podcast later, but it's not as exciting somehow. I don't know. All right. We're on our 50 millionth day in solitude for many of us, or home confinement for others. People are getting antsy to get this thing over with, and of course we're in no position to actually be doing that. But the president had another one of his temper tantrum attempts at having a rally. I think he's doing himself tremendous damage at this point every time he's doing it. But he so far refuses to stop trying to grab all the glory. So let's see. Yesterday, thank you very much. Bill tells me it's July 15th is the new deadline for filing for taxes. As he says, sincerely, research monkey number 42. You don't want to be a research monkey in the age of the great search for the COVID-19 vaccine, by the way. So let's look for another job for you there, Bill. Thanks very much. In fact, the other job was getting us started with the morning tweet. We do have that. And, of course, taking care of, his own troops there with his own morning zoo, as it were, right? Every morning and bringing everybody the sunshine and happiness that we all need to get through these trying times. I feel like a commercial for anything at this point. It doesn't matter what you're selling. In these uncertain times, whatever, Depends diapers will keep. That's true. People actually, of course, will need those at any point. Doesn't matter whether there's COVID-19 or anything like that. But in these uncertain times, when you're really uncertain about whether or not you can make it to the bathroom in time, for instance, or whatever, everybody's trying to now make their product or service fit in with this thing, or even if it doesn't matter. We're all scared, and we'll have this commercial now reminding you of how scared you are so that you continue to buy our product. Okay, well, that's the purpose of advertising. Anyway, Daily Co's Radio is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, and Greg Dworkin, our own Dem from Connecticut, on Twitter. Update you on COVID-19, not COVID-1, not COVID-2, COVID-19. I'll explain in a moment. And reveal the president's new campaign slogan, Trump 2020. All of the authority, none of the responsibility, which I've just reduced to the Spider-Man line of, with total authority comes no responsibility. Remember when he wouldn't take any responsibility? No, I don't take any responsibility for this at all, but my authority is total. That about sums it up. I mentioned COVID-1, COVID-2, etc. Kellyanne Conway apparently captured on the air this morning by the good folks at Media Matters, lecturing the panel she was on in Fox, whatever Fox News show was on this morning. Kellyanne Conway telling everybody, this is COVID-19. I think this is a follow-up to Trump's efforts yesterday to scapegoat the World Health Organization for everything that's going wrong in America, especially with relation to COVID-19. Yeah, his position now is they weren't telling the truth. They weren't forthcoming, just like the Chinese. We would have totally defeated this thing if they had just been transparent and real, and so the punishment appropriate to the moment: cut off all American funding for the World Health Organization in the middle of a pandemic. Very smart of President Trump. That's just exactly what we need to do, of course. So she's out there, I guess, having to defend this thing. She says now, this is COVID-19, not COVID-1, folks. And so you would think the people in charge of the World Health Organization, facts and figures, would be on top of that. Like, in other words, we would have gotten this right by the time COVID-19 rolled around, because we would have practiced on COVID-1, COVID-2, COVID-3, and 4, et cetera, et cetera. But as Bobby Lewis points out correctly for Media Matters in his capturing this thing and commentary afterwards, as you know, the 19 stands for 2019, the year it was discovered, not that this is the 19th time that this virus has appeared, or any coronavirus had appeared, for that matter. Kellyanne Conway probably knows this. It's a good point. She probably does. She's just serving dumbass lines that sound good because it gets the base riled up. What was that about putting politics aside, we heard again? Yeah, that's right. So one more comment from Bobby Lewis here. Yeah, they're all bigots and right-wing hacks. But to me, the worst thing about Fox and Friends is that everything is so goddamn effing dumb all the time. And that's pretty much it. And once again, I fail our good friends who encourage me to simply let loose and read the line as it's written here. He didn't say effing dumb. I don't know. There's something about being so early in the morning that makes it difficult for me to break my rule. Also, my rule is stupid. And stupid rules, I don't know, they're very difficult to break for some reason. Rules are always, they're made to be broken, but for some reason, the stupid ones that don't make any sense tend to freeze me in place a little while longer, which is exactly what you don't want. One day I'll break out of this thinking. Okay, let's see. A couple other stories circulating this morning. Last night, I happened to see, for instance, Trey Hollingsworth making a splash for some reason or another. One of, I guess, the latest patrician ivory tower-ish kind of, he's not an academic, he's just a rich guy. Patrician, in his case, ivory tower in some other cases, guy to call for the reopening of the economy already. Come on, why don't we get it started? Another one of those guys who says, yes, I'm aware that restarting the economy will cost lives. Lots of things cost lives, and I'm just such a cold, calculating kind of a economic-minded guy. I just, don't mind. I'm willing to put my name to the proposal that we simply reopen. We're not in any position to reopen. The president was hinting at that anyway yesterday, and I think the doctors probably if you were allowed to touch your face, they would have slapped their foreheads in front of everybody he just couldn't help himself but blurt out that we might even open before May 1st in his press conference, which I'm sure none of the doctors wanted him to say. Don't promise a date, and especially don't say before May 1st. That's tantamount to saying, well, Easter or the next day or whatever, something like that. He's still stuck on that. Well, this Hollingsworth fellow likewise jumped on that bandwagon the other day, and CNN Politics, I guess, tweeted around his story. Republican Representative Trey Hollingsworth says, letting more Americans die of the coronavirus is the lesser of two evils compared to the economy tanking. So this is obviously somebody with a great understanding of either death or the economy, correct? Right? Maybe you've never heard of Trey Hollingsworth, but he's another one of these guys, by the way. I love these guys who go by Trey, thinking that's much more accessible than admitting that Trey is the nickname for somebody who bears the third such name, who we would otherwise call, if he was older and maybe had like mutton chops or something and it was in a portrait from the 1800s, we would call him by his full name. It's Joseph Albert, which isn't particularly patrician, but Hollingsworth, that's kind of a stuffy name. Joseph Albert Hollingsworth III, or if you prefer, J.A. Hollingsworth III. But he goes by Trey because he's just a regular guy. Well, anyway, I don't know. I looked him up, and to no one's surprise, I'm sure, I found that in his Wikipedia profile, we found, first of all, his full name. That's what I was mostly interested in, what is Trey actually a nickname for? Yes, so Joseph Albert Hollingsworth III. And what's his background? Well, as it turns out, let me look it up, and I'll read it to you. I had it. I took a screenshot of it before, but I thought maybe I would just quickly read the rest of it to you, just so you get an idea of who we're talking about and whether or not he's the kind of guy you want to listen to about sacrificing lives to reopen the economy. He's 36 years old. That makes him born in 1983. That would have been my, sophomore year in high school or something like that. Was when he was born. Born in Tennessee. He now lives in and represents Indiana for some unknown reason. Anyway, whatever. I don't know what draws people to where they're from. I wasn't born in Virginia. But I wanted to sort of take a look at his early life, let's say, and education. And I found out that Hollingsworth, he attended the Webb School in Knoxville, Tennessee as a youngster. I don't know anything about it, but I'm sure it's a fine institution, private institution, no doubt, from which he went on to the equally very fine University of Pennsylvania, graduating from the Wharton School, famous for allowing Donald Trump to graduate and keep a degree from the Wharton School. But at any rate, after graduating from Wharton, how did he work his way up in the economy such that he becomes an expert in how many lives ought to be sacrificed in order to restart it following a pandemic, or in the middle of a pandemic, as the case may be? And the answer is, well, after graduating from Wharton, Hollingsworth founded Hollingsworth Capital Partners with his father, Joe Hollingsworth Jr., as a silent partner, which of course means that Hollingsworth Capital Partners was a graduation gift to Trey. Would you like to be in charge of a hedge fund or have your own venture capital fund or capital, wealth asset management fund, and you're impatient and no one will hire you and you're 21 years old and you have no experience, but you graduated from Wharton and we have a tremendous pile of money? Well, here's a smaller portion of that money, and not that much smaller either, to start your own company, and I'll just sit here and let you do that. What did the company do? As it turns out, what he did with it, he specialized in rebuilding old manufacturing sites and returning them to service. He also founded an aluminum remanufacturing company, which I guess is supposed to be like recycling or something like that. I have no doubt that it was hard work, et cetera, et cetera. But just in case you're wondering sort of like what else he's done in life, let's see. When did he graduate from college? Is this all in here somewhere? I'm not certain exactly when. So let's say, but he's in his first term, I guess. Second term, I guess. Would have been elected in 2016, assumed office in 2017, so he's in his second term. Where's I don't know. Well, at any rate, let's see. He does it not say what year he graduated from Wharton? I guess I could figure that out. If he was born in 83, say 93, 2003 would be 20. So somewhere around 2003, 2004. He went on apparently to get a master's in public policy from Georgetown University as well. I don't know if he was already working at Hollingsworth Capital Partners at the time or not. But at any rate, so I guess he finishes his schooling somewhere in the neighborhood of 2005 or so. 2005, 2006. 10 years later, he's in Congress. So a good 10 years of having his dad give him a bunch of money and him using it to start an aluminum recycling company. It was not the worst thing you could do, I'm sure. And it's an interesting way of putting things. I know nothing about the other portion of the business. What did they say? Reconditioning, renovating and rehabilitating abandoned industrial sites. So he was instead of being a house flipper, he was an industrial site flipper. And upshot of it is, I don't know how much of it comes from this is how much money my dad gave me, or this is what I parlayed my dad's gift to me into. But it does note at the bottom of the initial section up here at the top of the Wikipedia, with a net worth of $50.1 million, Hollingsworth is the 12th wealthiest member of Congress. He's, again, member of Congress that includes the Senate as well. Out of 535 members at age 36, with 10 years of experience between graduation and assuming office, he is the 12th wealthiest member of them all. By the way, are you curious at all about who the 12 wealthiest are? Number one is a newcomer, but you may have heard that she was, in fact, the wealthiest member of Congress. Kelly Loeffler, the insider trader who dashed out of the first serious briefing she had gotten since being appointed to the Senate seat about the coronavirus and ran out and invested in DuPont because they were the biggest manufacturer of PPE. Right, and sold all her holdings in retail outlets, etc., and then invested in Citrix, the online meetings specialist, software specialist. Okay, well, just thought I'd mention that. So she's the wealthiest member of Congress, and the first thing she did was to run out and try to become wealthier in case anybody should try to catch up with her. She's got a pretty significant lead, though. She's net worth of about $500 million, $500 million. That's pretty good. The second wealthiest, by the way, is Greg Gianforte, the Republican representative from Montana, who famously assaulted the journalists covering his campaign. Remember that one? He's the second wealthiest guy in Congress. Isn't that kind of disgusting? $135.7 million is where they peg his net worth. Next up, Representative Michael McCall, Republican of Texas. And fourth, the first Democrat on the list, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, who I knew to be a tech entrepreneur before he entered politics. He's got a net worth of about $90 million, 90.2. Vern Buchanan, Republican of Florida, comes next at 73.9 million. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, one of Greg's own, is worth 70 million. And then let's see. That's interesting. The list then goes up to number 7. Dianne Feinstein comes in at number 7, $58.5 million. And then the list jumps for some reason to 12, where Trey Hollingsworth is. And I don't know whether that's because I entered this list from the Trey Hollingsworth entry, or whether there's a tie for positions 8 through 11. But why not list them? I don't know why that's pretty odd. Well, anyway, I don't know. It gives you some idea of what's going on here. But wow. Anyway, that's a lot of money, especially when you're 36 years of age and are harping about the economy has to be opened up again. And please, won't you just get it started again? Dad, restart the economy. I'm not making enough money. I'm not really sure why that is happening that way, but so it is. All right, let's see. I have a note here, by the way, from Greg, who was first saying, give me 5 minutes, but now has asked, is there any alternative to Skype? The computer is fine, and Skype is not. Do I have an alternative to Skype? Wow. Not handy. But I don't know. Anybody got any suggestions that we can quickly download? I mean, I guess we could do like Zoom, right? But I have never actually initiated a Zoom conference. Let me see. We'll think about that. But that's too bad. So Skype's not working. Huh? I mean, is it not starting at all, Greg? Or is it not? Are you not able to call me? Maybe I could call you. We could think about anything else here. Oh, that's too bad. Let's see. Is your Raft O Stories racked up? It's not. So Skype isn't opening at all for you. Why don't we? I don't know. Let's buy Skype and relaunch it. There's nothing I can do about that one. Let's see. Weak signal is the problem from Skype. That's unusual. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out an alternative to that, and I'll see whether maybe over the break I can come up with something. I see not even the texts are going through, so I can't get the list of stories, although we can probably work it through Twitter to get the stories anyway. But maybe during the break I can search around. I did have that other, at one point, although it's not on the new show running computer, I had installed an alternative to Skype that I had used for conferencing with Gideon from overseas. Google Hangout might work. That's a good suggestion. Let's see. Can I rig that up on the show computer? Do they still do Google Hangout? Does Google still have Google Hangout? I don't even know. All right, let's see. I'll try some things here and do a little experimenting. Yeah, I think it's going to have to wait though until we do until we get ourselves a chance to sort of settle down during the break and experiment. But we'll take a look. All right. In the meantime, I do have a couple other stories, obviously, that we can share. Just not just the disturbing story of Trey Hollingsworth. I think we could probably even leave aside the particulars of what he thinks ought to be done in restarting the economy. I can summarize for you offhand what the president's thinking, if you can call it that, is on the subject. He insisted yesterday in his press conference that he had a plan ready for restarting the economy. The plan, as far as I can tell, he gave his usual sort of 2-hour description of it, saying basically that he's got a date in mind, but I don't want to tell you what the date is, because his thinking is, well, one, we probably won't be able to make it by that date, and two, that date also could be disastrous, and I don't really want to be associated with it. So I've got a date, but I can't tell you the date because we're not sure about it. I got to talk to some more people about it. But the more interesting part of it was he was insisting, since he had said the day before that his authority to reopen the economy was total, even though he was leaving it to the governors because he liked them so much and he was allowing them to decide when to restart the economy. He's been questioned since about, well, what will you do if certain states don't restart the economy, even though you want it restarted by a certain date? And he gave both answers to that one too. First, he said there's going to be no pressure. I won't pressure anybody. They'll reopen when it's safe. I don't want to risk anybody, But he did later on say that if states didn't reopen, although everybody would, he was pretty sure because they wanted to. And when he says go, they'll want to go. But if they don't reopen, if anybody's being non-cooperative, well, then I'm going to come down on them very hard, very heavily, because we have to. We can't just let that go, So he's got a little bit of a plan to punish people and a little bit of a plan not to punish people. And he's got a date, but he won't tell you the date. And the date could be sooner. This was an interesting thing, too. I've got a date in mind. Some states might be ready to open even before that date. Huh? Even before. That's how good they're doing. There's a lot of states that are doing just terrific. And in fact, he didn't want to tell you what those states were or how many of them there were that were ready to open already, even now. But some people were saying it was 29. Just sort of putting it out there. The 29 states, he says, are ready to reopen. I don't know how you would get to a list of 29, but whatever. So it's a plan and it has a date, but he won't tell you the date. And it could be before that date. It also could be after that date. But we'll see what happens. And what if people don't open on that date? I won't do anything, but I might also come down very heavily on them because of how important it is. So that's the plan. There is a date. You won't know it. You could open before it. You could open on it. You could open after it. There might be consequences for doing either or both, or there might not be. But that's the plan. It's all written down. So cool. We're ready to roll. All right, let's see. It's taking us up to the break. Oh, let me take note. Here's a short-ish item, I think, that we can get in before the break, and I start scrambling around to see if we can make Google Hangouts work so that we can salvage some time with Greg today. Also, during the break, I'm going to go punch Skype in the face, because that usually works when things are broken. But here's interesting news. if you were wondering whether conservatives, I was going to say like principled conservatives, but duh. And also the example that I grabbed isn't a principled conservative, but he is a conservative. If you're wondering when conservatives might say, hey, wait a second, the idea that the president has total authority over the states. I love the Federalist, and I'm part of the Federalist Society, and federalism really ordinarily would frown on the idea that states are just formalities that the president can sweep aside at will. Pardon me. Well, then you'll be somewhat interested in the tweet of, you'd be somewhat interested in the content of this tweet. You'll be less interested when I tell you it comes from Rich Lowry. But, there it is. I guess he writes this piece I didn't click through yet in National Review entitled, No, Trump Can't Force States to Reopen. Glad they acknowledged that. It was an interesting tweet, I guess. And since we have like 30 seconds, I guess I'll tell you what it was. Rich Lowry tweets along with this article, what Trump has been saying about his power over the states is constitutional nonsense that must be one of the most flagrant misrepresentations of our system ever made by a president of the United States in public. It really should have been made in public by a president of the United States, a more powerful statement, a more powerful, strongly more powerful and very, very beautiful statement of it. But yeah, that's true. I agree with the sentiment. This might be like the first time where I say, yeah, I agree with, Rich Lowry about anything, but I bet if I read enough of the piece, I'll find something to disagree, and then we'll all be comfortable once again. But in terms of the basic sentiment, yeah, constitutional nonsense that must be one of the most flagrant misrepresentatives of our system ever made by a president of the United States, publicly or privately. Quite honestly, I think we can just cap it off that way. All right, here begins a 2-minute sprint to see whether we can make Google Hangouts work. I hope you're ready, Greg. We'll be back in 2 minutes. I will anyway. See who else is with me. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we have a temporary fix rigged up. Google Hangout seems to be working. My minimalist show running computer that doesn't have anything plugged into it except what we need to run the show has no camera. But it's
probably a good thing, given my camera.
Well, I can see Greg, and he can't see me, so I'm going to put my thumbs in my ears and wag moose antlers at you and give you all sorts of...
Moose antlers. Yeah. The nice thing about going state to state with this social distancing is every different state gives you a guide as to how to stay apart. Oh, yes, like Florida, you stay an alligator apart.
I did see that.
And in Maine and Alaska, you stay moose apart.
Yes, I saw that. Chicago, I guess one of the restaurants in Chicago, I think, was telling people to stay about 10 feet apart. And said if you want to know how much that is, I can't remember the name of the guy, but they're like, basically, think of the Chicago Bears quarterback and how far away from the receiver he usually throws the ball.
Yeah, something like that.
That's about 10 feet, the amount by he misses his receivers.
Yeah, you can stay a refrigerator apart, that sort of thing. So anyway, welcome to the show. I'm saying to myself.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So let's do some politics, because there's a heck of a lot of politics going on here.
Oh. Where? Here? All right. Let's
this is from a month ago by one of my favorite prognosticators, Stu Rothenberg, semi-retired, but not totally. Still follows this stuff.
Okay.
And he wrote a month ago, and I think this is worth going over, especially in light of Elizabeth Warren's endorsement this morning of Joe Biden. Bernie did the other day. Presidential race now leans toward the Democrats. Democrats
us.
coalescing around Biden shifts race away from Trump. This was on March 18th.
Yeah. All right.
And he wrote, more than 14 months ago, I wrote a column saying it was a toss-up, but one that tilted toward the Democrats. I offered caveats about the economy. Democrats are likely to be united in the fall. They are now, or as Gabe Benedetti said on Twitter, Voltron has assembled.
All right.
Democratic Voltron. You got Biden, you got Warren, you got Sanders, you got Harris, you got them all. Democrats are likely to be united in the fall. And President Donald Trump's standing is stuck where it's been for many months. There's also more questions about presidential leadership and the economy. And he's an underdog now in his bid for a second term. Doesn't mean he can't win. It just means he's in a more difficult place than he was before, in part because Democrats have united behind a consensus candidate who's potentially got broad appeal. I didn't anticipate impeachment or the coronavirus pandemic or the news about Trump's effort to manipulate Ukraine, but my assessment of the race fundamentals, my reading of the president standing in the polls, and my general assessment of the race remains little changed. Moreover, most, if not all, of the changes appear to benefit the Democrats, enhancing their prospects for 2020. Okay, and that was a month ago. So this morning, Josh Krashour writes in National Journal, why Trump's slump is likely to last all year. The president is losing ground in the polls, and he is. I mean, he's behind in Arizona by 9 points, according to a poll, if you believe that. The president is losing ground in polls, faces a worsening economy, and is watching Democrats unify behind Joe Biden ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And he's in an increasingly precarious position for re-election as he struggles to maintain focus on the coronavirus pandemic. And the reason I'm starting with politics is those politics are affecting every single thing that Trump does. Every part of his response to the coronavirus is based on how is it going to help my re-election. It's not on what's good for the country or how I can not kill you. In fact, if I can make a buck, or better yet, get elected and make a buck, I'll happily kill you.
Hey, terrific. I'm available to be killed starting at 11.
So Josh writes, President Trump's increasingly precarious as he struggles to maintain focus, instead nursing his personal grievances against the press and his political rivals in a time of crisis. He's already squandered the rally round the flag bounce, as small as it was, that he received in the immediate aftermath of the crisis, and polling suggests the president's losing ground to presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden nationally and in key battleground states. Remember, folks, they go together. And I get sick and tired of saying, well, he's got a 72-point lead nationally, but there's the Electoral College. What does that mean? They go together. They've always gone together. If you want, you can think of it as the generic Democratic ballot. It's got to be above 8 or 9, above 7 certainly, for the Democrats to win. It was, and that's what happened in 2018. So Biden's got a 6-point lead in the polls right now. Think of that as the generic, I got to be above 7 to win. And he's awfully close to it. And that's the baseline. So basically, if you look at the polls, Wisconsin's tied. I mean, Biden's leading there by 3. Michigan's tied. At least Biden's winning there by 3. Of course, it's not tied if you look at some of the trackers, the tracking polls. My favorite these days to look at, just because they have the polling data so handy, is the Microsoft Network Tracker. Now, they have Trump today, April 15th, at approved 39 and disapproved 56. So in the last couple of days, he's really done badly, and he's going to do worse as time goes on. But let's look at some of these swing states here, which I think are important.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Now, remember, it's not the height of the numbers I'm telling you, it's the trend. So, for example, on March 1st, Wisconsin was 49-44 voting for a Republican over voting a Democrat for a Republican. And more to the point, specifically Biden-Trump, back on March 1st, I'll tell you as soon as it loads, Wisconsin was 42 Trump, 46 Biden.
Okay.
In this poll, March 1st.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Wisconsin's 39-52.
Okay. That's larger.
That's a good deal larger. And remember what just happened with the Wisconsin election that we hadn't covered, because it wasn't until Monday evening that they actually filled in all the blanks and told us who won. Right. Michigan is now Trump 37, Biden 52. Pennsylvania 38-53. Florida 40-52. Texas, 43-46. That's also moving in Biden's direction, 46 for Biden. Arizona, 42-49 Biden. I mean, all of these numbers, again, don't take the height of it. It's not like Biden's going to win Arizona by 6 points. But, hey, there was this other poll that says he's going to win by 9. I mean, the point of all of this is that just as we have been telling you would happen, as this magnitude of the coronavirus debacle sinks in, along with the economic fallout from it, Trump is losing ground. And how low can he go? Well, it's been a long time since he's been below 40 in any poll. And here he is at 39 today. Mm-hmm. And that matches with what Stu said a month ago. And that matches with what Josh Grashower is saying today.
That's a lot of matches.
He's simply, frankly, not doing that well.
Yeah. Well, he's a terrible person.
He is.
And the
okay.
Worst
Then of course, we have Navigator Research Survey, Democratic Polling Initiative. They're doing a tracker. Support for Trump's handling of the crisis hit its lowest level since the disease began spreading, 46% approving and 50% disapproving. Again, this is in the middle of a rally around the president. And deeper inside, you may recall from another show, we talked about the fact that the support for Trump is like 37% really support him, and then there's another 13% who say, I feel like it's my obligation to support the president in a crisis. So a lot of that is weak numbers. Yeah. And then Josh adds the Republican consulting firm Firehouse Strategies, whose surveys have generally been favorable to the president, had more sober news. Trump trailing Biden by 10 points, 53-43 among registered voters. And all this month's national polls testing Trump against Biden found the president stuck between 39 and 44% of the vote. That's the thing. You never see him above 44 in these head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Then he throws in even Wisconsin, one of Trump's strongest battlegrounds, isn't looking like a safe bet for Republicans this week. Jill Karofsky, the liberal candidate for the state Supreme Court, handily defeated conservative Justice Stan Kelly by 10 points in a contest that served as a proxy for competing partisan passions. And Amy Walter had a piece about Republicans really worried about, well, they're weakly enthusiastic. Yeah, well, they show up to vote, and weakly enthusiastic votes sure seem to count.
That's true. They do. They seem to count for the same amount. There's no little bubble you can fill in on the Scantron sheet.
Well, let's take off a point here or there. You get a B- instead of an A+ on that vote. Here's the harsh reality: Trump is down in the polls, may still slip further back. Thank you. That's what I've been saying all along. It's okay to say it's really close and we don't know who will win. It's perfectly fine to say these polls are in April and we don't know what they mean as in regard to November. That's all true.
Let's say that. All right.
But it's also true that Trump could get clobbered and this could be a landslide, and people are frickin' afraid to say that because 2016 and post-traumatic distress.
Yeah, right. And
but it's true. He can get clobbered. This can get so bad he can't win anywhere except Idaho.
That would be great. And, I'm minus the winning the Idaho part.
Yeah, well, no fault of Joan, but, these things can happen. So he's down in the polls. He may step further back. Biden expanding the map into Arizona. The president losing ground in the Midwest. Democrats have more plausible paths to an electoral college majority. They could trade Arizona for Wisconsin or even North Carolina. They could also win Arizona and Wisconsin and North Carolina and Florida. That's not beyond the realm of possibility. They're leading in all of those states. They can make Georgia competitive. They can make Texas competitive if this keeps going.
Okay, I think we should do it, and you never want to. We're all well conditioned not to become complacent. I don't think he should get a single vote, and we'll just strive for that and work as though.
And then let me read his final line, which I thanked him for writing.
Josh, okay.
This is an Overton window thing.
All right.
Right. Everybody was really quick to say, "Well, Trump got away with impeachment, therefore he's cruising to re-election," and all my friends think so. Josh writes, "These are trends more suggestive of a Democratic blowout than a second Trump term." There it is in writing by a conservative columnist.
Good. We'll hold
it's
that
a
up
possibility,
next to the other guy.
folks. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. I'm not predicting it. But you can't discount it and say everything is the same tomorrow as it was yesterday. There's a 50-50 nation, and he's bound to win Biden by like 1 point, and that doesn't make me feel comfortable. So work like you're 25 points down. I hate that.
Oh, well,
Work like you're 1 point ahead, and that's not enough. But see that on the horizon, you've got victory, and you can taste it.
okay.
That's the way you
Maybe
should
that'll
approach
help you
this.
work. But whatever makes you work harder, I suppose. My goal is.
I love losing, so I'm just going to work real hard because I know that I'm 25 points down, and that's just great. I love being in this position.
Yes, so that does
No.
make people nervous.
I don't think so.
I don't think he deserves a single vote, and I will work until all of his voters have died. How about that?
Ohio is turning out to be a battleground state. Who knew? We all wrote it off years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
right?
True. All right. Well, we have the ability to do this time.
42 Trump, 49 Biden in the Ohio thing. Okay.
Okay.
So Elizabeth Warren endorses,
Ohio.
and as I told
Yes,
you
right,
a month ago, she's late to the game. Does anybody care?
I don't. I'm looking around. There's nobody. I can't see anybody behind you. Who cares?
She did one thing though that Nancy Pelosi didn't do when she talked about how bad Trump was yesterday, and we can go over that.
Sure.
She is doing something that Bernie didn't do. When Bernie had a great endorsement of Biden and then went on to say in an interview that anybody not voting for Biden is nuts.
Yeah.
And, I have no, and somebody asked him about Bree Joy, and he said, she's my former employer.
Yeah,
She's not on my payroll. I don't know.
I guess
That was great.
Yeah.
But Warren is doing something
What is
that
this-
the others didn't
this
do
thing?
and said, get money to Joe.
Oh. All right, money. Good.
She included an ask as part of her endorsement. Obama didn't do that. He endorsed too.
Well, he's very.
He's part of the Voltron.
Something.
He's the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an important thing to do, and I don't really know why everybody doesn't do that, or say go to whatever JoeBiden.com. I don't know where you go to give money.
Right. I just always find it frustrating when the pundits are afraid that it's like the emperor has no clothes, and they're afraid they're going to get mean tweeted if they say, you know what, he could really lose in a blowout. That doesn't mean he will.
I wonder.
But if they said, well, Trump could really win in a blowout, nobody would yell at them. Nobody would say,
true.
oh, that you can't say that. That's impossible. How dare you? You got to turn in your credentials. You can't possibly say something so ridiculous.
I don't know. I
Trump
guess
can
it's
lose in a
easy-
blowout. Just say it.
It's equal parts that I suppose some people could be afraid of being yelled at by conservatives, and others are just sort of like, I like you
Aren't many
mentioned, they're
conservatives
so
listen.
afraid
They're all
from,
never Trumpers.
from
What are you worried about?
2016. Like I said it in 2016, he should get crushed, and then I guess anything can happen, and I don't want to predict something that doesn't come to pass, but.
It's not a prediction.
Right, you can say that, but people don't care whether it's a prediction or not. That's a prediction. I saw you write it, and it's April, so it must be a prediction. Yeah. Well, it's not, but it is. So whatever. Okay. Well, this looks like bad news for Trump. Now, how do we deal with the fact that he claims to be president until we vote him out?
Well, that's unfortunately true. We tried impeachment. That didn't work. 25th Amendment isn't really practical. So what's going to happen is he's going to neuter himself. He'll declare the country open because Republicans want to make a buck. Nobody will listen. And then what?
And they won't make a buck. That's the best part about it.
Yeah, well, the nice
also
thing
the
is they're
worst part.
losing a lot of money. The bad thing is, yes, they do employ people. I still am a capitalist like Elizabeth Warren is. This is our current structure. And so I'm not interested in having the whole thing get destroyed. But at the same time, it's just bizarre that people still support Trump, even Republicans, after what he's doing.
It's bizarre that they support him even though he doesn't know what he's doing and there isn't anything to support. That literally that press conference yesterday, we're going to open, there's going to be a date. I won't tell you the date. You could open before it. You might open after it.
Yeah, the date's May 1st. He's already told us the date.
He did blurt it out, but by first prefacing, I don't want to tell you the date, but it's May 1st. Anyway, you're right, and you could open
because I've got a
May
commission,
1st.
And Jared and Ivanka are on that commission. So
Right.
Don't worry. We've got experts there like Larry Kudlow, who's always right about everything.
sure.
So don't worry about it. We got you back.
And but yeah, you could open before that date. You could open after that date. You could open on that date.
Meanwhile, people
that's some
who
plan.
the Republican governors, like in South Dakota, who refuse to do social distancing, are
Right.
finding big outbreaks in their communities.
Yes.
And that is spreading. And, now there's all sorts
How
of
is it
murmuring
spreading?
about
How does
Florida that they're suppressing the numbers and not telling you the deaths and not being honest about what's going on. This is not going to end well.
No, the chairman general of the Florida Communist Party, Ron DeSantis, is hiding his numbers just like the Chinese.
Yeah, something like that.
Excellent.
So all of that is happening. So let's say for the sake of argument, Joe Biden does win.
All right.
Before he wins, he's going to have to pick a vice president. Who should that be? You got opinions?
Not really.
Everybody's got opinions.
Okay, yes.
He said it's going to be a woman.
Okay.
Be nice if it was a woman of color.
Sure, right.
Or Latino or black or somebody.
Or blah.
But
Yeah.
Politico Morning Console poll this morning. Voters prioritize experienced VP for Biden over gender and race. 2/3 of registered voters and 4 out of 5 Democrats say it's important for Joe Biden to pick a running mate with governing experience.
Well, sure. Yes. And
Does that surprise you?
no, that sounds like a very practical thing to do, and I don't think that Democrats are going to self-identify and then say, I don't really care whether this person is good at anything. They just have to be the right gender or color. They're not going to say that outright. They're going to say, but they may say, I want someone with experience. And there are plenty out there who also meet the other criteria.
Right. Only 29% of voters said it was important for Biden to choose a woman. 22% said it was important that he choose a person of color. Among Democrats, 8 and 10 said it was important that Biden's vice presidential selection have legislative and executive experience. Now, you have to step back and look at the big picture. Why did all of a sudden Biden, who was struggling, suddenly consolidate everybody about him? How come all of a sudden he became Voltron and collected all the parts of the Democratic Party and then became this giant, monstrosity, behemoth, juggernaut? How did that happen? It happened because we had a pandemic and people said, you know what, government experience actually does matter. And because that's the case, why should it be surprising that they also prioritize experience in a vice president, given that Joe Biden's 109 years old and you got to worry about the second term and you got to worry about the first term and so on and so forth. So none of it is a surprise.
Right.
And that being the case, whereas before the coronavirus, everybody was talking about Stacey Abrams as being the perfect on paper candidate, except me, because I didn't think she had enough experience. Yeah, I mean, she's got charisma, great personality. She's got experience bringing people together. She's doing great things in Georgia. She should have been the governor, but not enough federal experience. I said.
Right.
Okay. Now, more true than ever. So if you're going to pick a vice presidential candidate, Harris is still top of the list, but Amy Klobuchar is rising. And everybody will say, oh, no, not Amy K. She doesn't excite. Well, this poll says otherwise.
Oh?
She was always my dark horse for president, and she didn't quite make it.
Yeah.
But Biden himself, a 2-term vice president, has spoken about how important and personal the choice of a running mate is to him. He likes Amy. Of course, he likes everybody, so that doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
All right, but let's go down and look at some of the numbers here. Warren, plus 48 percentage points among Democrats, edges out Harris, 44 points, and Klobuchar, 38 points, in net favorability among Democrats. The Massachusetts senator, that would be Warren, also leads the other two in the category among self-identified liberals, plus 53 for Harris's 46 and Klobuchar's 40. African Americans, plus 29 to Harris's 20 and Klobuchar's 17. And voters with an unfavorable view of Donald Trump, plus 38 points to Harris 34 and Klobuchar's 33. So Warren would be the choice of the Democrats according to the poll. I don't think it'd be a good choice because of her age. I don't think you can have 270-plus people.
Right, because that's like 140, and you don't want that.
Don't worry about whether or not her particular state is brought along, because no, I'm talking about all of them.
Oh, any of them. Okay.
Picking the vice president based on you'll win that state.
I see.
Is Mike Dukakis picking Lloyd Bentsen?
Yeah. All right. True.
Right. It doesn't help you. There's a new book out about vice presidents.
It's called "It Doesn't Help You."
It doesn't really matter. That's the next book.
Yeah.
Truly, that's the name of the next book.
Oh.
But this book is The VP Advantage, written by Christopher Devine and Kyle Kopko. Came in the mail just the other day, and I haven't read it yet. But
Thank you.
thumbing through it, the thesis is that the vice president choice tells you something about the candidate, who they're thinking about, what sort of things are important to them. But it doesn't win a state, and you can't do it based on sitting down at 270 to win and figuring out how it's going to help you. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no,
So
you can't just pick a long shot state.
right. So having said all of that about the different candidates' rankings, with among Democrats, Warren, Harris, Klobuchar in that order, Klobuchar enjoys higher net marks in the most categories overall, including several key ones. Minnesota Senator Bester to 2 colleagues among all voters and in every region of the country, including the Midwest, Northeast, South, and West. And Klobuchar had a stronger image among white voters, independents, Republicans, moderates, and conservatives, and those with a favorable view of Trump. Harris followed closely by Warren among Latino voters and trails Klobuchar slightly in the West. And so when you take all of that and then you figure in Biden's chemistry, Klobuchar's very much still in the running, and people are going to say, no, not another Tim Kaine. Well, of course, the argument can be made that Tim Kaine helped Clinton win Virginia in a year that she lost other blue wall states. So I don't know how.
That doesn't work.
We said it doesn't work, and I think that's not a good argument.
Okay.
And I don't think Tim Kaine was a fantastic choice. But is this 2016 all over again? No.
Yes. Oh. No.
Any more
What did I say?
than Biden is Clinton, and we told you not to pick Biden, and now you're picking somebody like Klobuchar, who we said was, none of that matters, folks. He's running against Trump, and Trump is an incumbent now and doing a horrible job and killing people. And Klobuchar is not, as his vice presidential choice, going to be the difference between winning and losing.
Yes.
So, if I would rather see him pick Harris, don't get me wrong. But if he picks Klobuchar, suck it up. That's the way it is, and move on.
Yeah, well, I won't be leaving over Amy Klobuchar. I might, duck.
She does have the experience that the Democratic base, according to this poll, says they are thinking about.
Don't listen to them. They're crazy.
Yeah, let's listen to people on Twitter and on the radio.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm bracing for it. What's the situation about her Senate seat? If we vacate that, are we okay with that?
Klobuchar?
Yeah.
I think better than with Warren.
Yes. Right. But say versus Harris. Harris is a lock for another Democrat.
Yeah, I think we're okay. We're okay with anything.
Okay. All right. Just checking. That's an important consideration. That has to be taken care of immediately.
Gretchen Whitmer's in the mix, and the weird thing about that is the lieutenant governor is also a good person, but I don't know if taking Whitmer out of the middle of a crisis, and Michigan is in crisis right now, is the best thing in the world.
That could be. But
if you're going to go with this whole experience matters thing, if that's your thesis, if that's your theory of the case, you got to be really careful about that.
You would want to be careful. However, I would imagine that the handoff between governor and lieutenant governor there, like if she says, "Here's the briefing book, don't throw it out," you could probably count on them not.
I think we'd be okay, but I'm just saying, there'd be some bad parts to this.
All right. Well, I don't need to root for.
But she's in the mix. She's in the mix as a competent woman with some executive experience that she's showing off right now.
Okay. True. And I won't deny that. I can't. I could. I won't. How about that? All right. Well, fine. When are we going to get an answer?
I don't know. When are we going to get an answer as to whether Justin Amash is actually still thinking of running for president?
Is that right? Oh, well, all right.
When is the Iowa caucus going to be declared by AP? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that we just don't know.
Yes. Well, I guess we have a lot of other things to calculate and worry about in the meantime. So that's fine, I guess. While Trump ponders whether or not he really wants to say out loud that May 1st is the opening date again. And right. I don't know whether we're going to have a convention. I'm still not sure we've settled what that's going to be like. That's something else to factor into. I don't think anybody's given any real thought to what does the vice presidential announcement, which usually gives a small boost in a good news cycle, what does it look like in a virtual convention atmosphere? Does it produce anything? Does it matter?
I guess can you imagine? I'm just thinking of like one of those early Star Wars movies where you have all of the senators on virtual. right? Because you can't be there in person.
Oh, yes, okay.
Or maybe a Jedi Council, Zoom meeting.
Holographic Zoom, yeah.
Because they're not really there. And each one of the little corners, there's 50 of them, right? And each one of the little corners. The great state of Connecticut, which is the home of nutmeggers, whatever that means.
I don't know.
It's not the same when you do it virtually.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know that we'll get the same sort of bounce out of it. Actually, when you were saying that, the whole thing, the first image that came to mind was Amy Klobuchar with a Princess Leia hairdo, which was weird for me.
Exactly.
I don't know, but it was like for you.
Well, I don't know, but a lot of those
like
guys are standing, because it's usually the oldest guy in the state or somebody else you want to feature who gets to hold the pole with the sign on it.
Yes.
And who gets to dress up in the state costume, whatever that is. Texas gets to wear a 10-gallon hat and boots, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, like, half these guys look like Yoda anyway.
Yeah, very often they do. Yes, the dean of the delegation, or sometimes the state chair, or whatever.
Exactly.
Or a famous resident. It's all
so you can make it work.
Pageantry. Yes. Even in virtual format, I think. But
that'll take you right up till 10 o'clock, so we did our job.
Okay, yeah, we've done it, and our Google Hangout worked. I was warned by Brian Monroe that I guess their Microsoft, which now owns Skype, is thinking of phasing it out and replacing it with one of their stupid products, and we might have to migrate to that one day anyway. So this might be a good day to start experimenting with Google Hangouts, because I don't want to bother getting used to, what is it, Microsoft Teams is what they're calling it. And I tried using that the other day for a doctor's appointment, and it was no fun.
Right.
Anyway,
so let's stick with this. Let's try this tomorrow and see if it works.
All right, very good. And maybe I'll even go and find a camera or something to plug it in, assuming that doesn't crash the computer. Thanks for hanging in there and trying this new format so that we could get the people the stories they wanted. Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, bring Abby. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That was a fun experience. Google Hangouts coming through on a pinch. And might have to rig up a camera here just to keep things on an even keel and a fair and even playing field so that we can see one another. And maybe we need to move to a video form. We've always threatened to move to a video format for the show, and maybe the quarantine is the time to do it. Greg's sporting a retirement/quarantine beard, so that we didn't get on the air, but thought I'd let you all know that. I've been avoiding it. I've thought about letting it come back in. I experimented with it about 2 years ago, and as a joke in the beginning of the quarantine, I sent out an old picture of it with the full beard going. I mean, it was pretty crazy full. But I sent that out in the first couple of days of the quarantine when people were showing their stubble, just as a joke, and then everybody thought that I was growing that back again, and they were disappointed to find out that was not the case. But I don't know. Didn't I probably told the stories at the time, right? And I finally decided to shave it off, when I would wake up and find that if I was sleeping on my stomach, that the beard was folded up back over my face, pressed against the pillow. So it wasn't a super convenient thing to do. And my passport photo still has it in there, which is probably also was a mistake. One, because they look very different and it makes people pause. And two, because, it used to be that, maybe it's still the case, that people in a travel setting were generally xenophobic, afraid of people with long beards. And maybe they would think I was from some strange foreign land or something. But it's a U.S. passport and the beard's gone, so I don't know what they had to have to fear. But they're not rational people, generally speaking. Plus, nobody sees your passport anyway, except people who see people who have beards all the time, the agents at the desk, and they're not going to be afraid of that either. Not to say that they won't be prejudiced against them, they just won't be afraid. I have no fear about isolating you and putting you in a room and locking you there with no representation for hours on end. That's not a fear for them. All right. Let's see. Jumping back to Pocket and to the Twitter feed to see what was on tap to share with you. I'll jump back to a subject that we've spent some time on before. Josh Marshall seems particularly fascinated by this, and I join him in that fascination. Therefore, I read you this entry. The excess mortality question in the U.S. comes into view. You know, he's been looking at the data from Spain and Italy and viewing things on, like I said, the question of the excess mortality. People who are dying, or the rates at which people are dying above and beyond what has been explicable, that is to say, explained by the coronavirus. Oh, also on the question of terminology. Who sent me this? Can I scroll back and find it? Did I mark it? Did I put it away in pocket? I got a note, and you know how I am about these things, and therefore I pass it on to you. And this is how I, well, it is the fact that you know that how I am about such things. That's why you've sent it to me. Here we are, Healthy Morty on Twitter. That's the handle. For some reason, the identity is Max Powers, which is an awesome name. I hope it's real, but it feels like it's not. But if it is, terrific. And where Morty would come from, I'm not sure, unless Morty is short for mortality, which is a possibility. But he's pointing out to us here, big fan of the podcast, and that's the end of the tweet. Everybody, thank you. A big fan of the podcast. Sorry to nitpick a bit, but and this is true. I recall that this was the case. I was using the word morbidity yesterday and probably end of last week when I really meant or should have been using the word mortality. They indicate different things. They're different terms. Morbidity seems, well, one, more morbid, and we all are having fun being more morbid these days. I don't know. Somehow that sounded like it might be technically more true because it's a more obscure word than mortality, which, you know, is also not all that easy a word. But anyway, that's the word we should be using. Mortality, not morbidity. Josh Marshall gets it right. I should too. So here we are. The excess mortality question in the U.S. comes into view. As you know, we've been focusing heavily, and by here he means me and him, I guess, on the excess mortality question in the COVID-19 pandemic across the world. Excess mortality is the number of deaths in a given region over a particular period of time, which is in excess of the average number of deaths during that time in previous years. We've looked closely at analyses from Italy and Spain, which show dramatic discrepancies between the reported number of COVID-19 fatalities and actual amount of excess mortality during the periods in question. In many cases, when this full excess mortality is calculated, the number is 2, 3, or even 4 times higher than the official COVID-19 death toll. What remains unknown in these other cases is how many of these additional deaths were hidden COVID-19 fatalities versus people who died as a result of the overall crisis but not the disease itself. This can range from an overwhelmed hospital system, which creates a degraded level of care, to stress imposed by the totality of the crisis, to people who do not seek medical attention for health crises they could have survived. And, you know, a number of other stops along the way and in between. New York City has taken a different approach with the new numbers it released yesterday, which was yesterday. That's what it says here, of course. This included the number of official COVID-19 fatalities, i.e. the lab-confirmed test telling you that it was a COVID-19 fatality. Those who are presumed to have died from COVID-19, that is, those who had symptoms and medical history but no lab-confirmed tests, and then the total number of people who died in the city during the period in question, between March 11th and April 13th. It is that last number, which we can compare to historical averages, to establish an approximate excess mortality figure. A brief note, he says, parenthetically, on method. In this discussion, I will often refer to an exact number for excess mortality, but these are derived by comparison to historical averages, so these are really approximations and estimates rather than concrete numbers. And now, let's assume for the sake of conversation, not argument, that the New York City clinicians have done a fairly good job catching the COVID-19 cases that lacked a lab-confirmed test. This allows us to distinguish between the hidden COVID-19 mortality and deaths caused by the knock-on effects of the crisis rather than directly by the disease itself. If we simply look at the official death toll as of yesterday and total excess mortality, the number is roughly double. 6,589 deaths versus roughly 13,000. As noted, about half of the additional toll are presumed diagnoses, and the rest are non-COVID-19 cases or ones in which COVID-19 was not obviously suspected. There's a parenthetical note here on computations from Josh Kovensky, offered in a different piece on Talking Points memo. Josh continues, though, I was interested to compare this to numbers from Spain and Italy. One comparison from the autonomous community of Castile and Leon in Spain showed a differential of 112 lab-tested COVID-19 deaths and a total excess mortality of 385 deaths over the period. So, the total excess mortality was more than 3 times the number of official COVID-19 deaths. In other words, something else other than officially designated COVID-19 is killing an awful lot of people, well above the average number you would expect. Another comparable analysis is from Madrid, and it found a total excess mortality of 6,613 deaths in the second half of March, of which 3,439, a little over half, could be attributed to official COVID-19 diagnoses. So 3,174 more people who died either from COVID-19 or from the knock-on effects of the crisis. In this case, it's a bit less than twice the number, which is in the ballpark of the statistics released yesterday by New York City. The other comparable analysis came from Nembro, the hardest hit town in Italy. That produced a total excess mortality 4 times the official number of COVID-19 deaths. A look at nearby towns showed even higher. It showed even higher disparities, I would guess. The upshot of the comparison is clear. New York City had substantially less excess mortality not captured in the official death toll than 2 of these 3 other examples. One possible pattern is that New York's numbers seem broadly comparable to Madrid's. Madrid is substantially smaller than New York, but these are still both major global cities. I'm no expert on either, but my impression is that Castile and Leon in Spain and the province of Bergamo in Italy are both much more rural, or at least more sparsely populated. It seems worth considering, and would not be surprising, whether major cities with their dense public health and hospital infrastructures may be better able to capture the true scale of the epidemic than more rural, or at least less urban, areas. We'll need to see comparable analyses from different countries and regions to confirm a pattern. Note that in these more sparsely populated areas, the absolute numbers were much smaller, so the multiples or percentages may tell us less. Looking at data from New York, Italy, and Spain, what we can say now is that we have the first indications of a baseline which suggests that the extent of excess mortality during COVID-19 epidemics is often at least twice the scale accounted for in the initial official COVID-19 death tolls. So, important to note, I guess, I would file this in close proximity to the reopen, not reopen, it's been bad, but not as bad as people said files. And when you're thinking about stuff like, well, as dumb as the idea of a date certain for reopening the economy is, whatever. But when you're thinking of reopening, whether you're going to open recklessly or cautiously, one of the things that needs to be kept in mind is that if you're driving towards reopening the economy based on saying, well, they said millions were going to die and they didn't. Far fewer people died than they said. It's true that far fewer people died of COVID-19 than was feared. And you could argue about whether or not the models included this as a lower bound to the numbers or not. And apparently they did. Certainly the revised model certainly did. And I'm glad we're coming in, in the broad sense, glad we're coming in on the low end of those numbers of that spectrum that the models put out there. But when you're one of the people that are looking to reopen the economy and therefore, earlier than you should probably, and therefore are doing everything you can to downplay the numbers, you can't forget that dead people are dead. And it doesn't matter why they're dead so much. I mean, it does. There's the political point that you could score by saying fewer people died of COVID-19 than they said. But if people are still dead, that has a lot of effects. One, the dead people don't actually care what killed them. Also a large number of people who didn't die from something, obvious causes other than COVID-19, but the death was clearly enough related to the crisis. The families of those people aren't going to forgive you for saying, well, it wasn't technically COVID-19 that killed them because they were also, constantly bronchial and had diabetes and a heart condition. So you don't count. They're going to want to be counted, and B, they are dead. And when you're talking about restarting the economy, why does the economy need to be restarted? Because it's stopped. Why is it stopped? Because people aren't at work. Well, what if we order everyone back to work? Well, what if you do and they're dead? They're not going to be there to work for you. So a large number of workers, a large number of consumers are dead and now missing from the economy. 26,000 confirmed dead from COVID aren't enough to impact the economy or drive a decision not to reopen. If you're a maniac, you say 26,000 people is nothing compared to the full population of the United States. That may be true. But then also Josh is pointing out, well, 26,000, but we also have good reason to believe that there's another 26,000 dead from something else in excess of what we would have expected from coronavirus, and we can't pinpoint what killed them, but they're dead nonetheless. So in all likelihood, a minimum of 50-something thousand people that weren't dead at the start of this crisis are now dead. 50,000 more than we would have expected to be, to have died for any reason, absent the coronavirus crisis. And that ought to be kept in mind. And that's, again, if we're at the lower bounds of the number. Some of these studies suggest that it was more than that, 3 times, 4 times the number of official COVID-19 deaths. And of course, if that were the case, well, then, remember, we're going to come in at 100,000, but we're going to come in much less, much less. But what if we are already at 100,000 and we don't know that we are, or we never find out exactly why we are? But 100,000 people dead is an entirely different story. And even just purely from an economic sense, I mean, just knocking out 100,000 people more than you expected to lose in the course of essentially a month or two, and we're not done yet, and in some cases it's understood that we're not at peak yet, we could be in for a real serious problem. That's one of the things that we've been talking about, waking Trump up briefly every once in a while when he changes tone, waking him up to reality, is that there's no way to bluff your way past a dead person. This person, on the question of whether they're dead or not, your spin isn't going to matter a great deal. You could argue about why they died and whether it was necessary or, how bad a thing it was or who's to blame. But dead is dead, and there's only so much you can do about it. And if there are 100,000 people dead that ordinarily wouldn't have been, that's going to have an impact. 100,000 people might be enough, depending on who they are in particular, to make a dent in the economy. Now, consider again who's dying in greater numbers, disproportionate numbers among the coronavirus dead. Is that equally true among the otherwise still unexplained excess mortality? The people who fit in that category, are they, I don't think anybody's got those numbers. Are they the same minorities? Are they the same socioeconomically? And while they wouldn't necessarily be bringing the most economic punch to the equation, let's say, they may be, again, as it turns out, our essential workers, as we wake up to that fact once again. 100,000 essential workers, people essential for the economy that's limping along. Imagine trying to reopen the economy only to find out, well, where is everybody? You're all fired. Well, we don't care because we're dead. I don't know how you're going to get around that. You can't legislate, bluff, or spin your way past the fact that you've now reopened. Let's say you're J.A. Harrington III. What's his name? Hollingsworth. I said Harrington. That sounds, patrician enough. But Hollingsworth. So you're Trey Hollingsworth, and you're going to reopen your, what did he call it? Aluminum remanufacturing plant, right? Damn it, we're open. Where is everybody? Only, 50 of you out of my 200 employees, only 50 of you died from COVID-19. Where are the rest of you? You're fired. Well, we don't care. We're also dead. There's actually, out of your 200 employees, 100 of them are dead, or 150 of them are dead. How dare you be dead if you didn't die from COVID-19? You don't count. What am I supposed to do? Well, look, the reality is you had 200 workers. You got 50 of them. You might be able to hire new workers. I don't know. But you open your plant, that doesn't mean it's going to work and you're going to make money if 3/4 of your workers are dead, even if they haven't given you a sufficient excuse for being dead. That's just the way death works. At least that's my understanding. Haven't experienced it myself so far, but I'm willing to go out on a limb on that one. All right. Well, anyway, let's see. Other issues that we ought to spend some time examining. Let's see. I will acknowledge that another of our followers and fans here, our friend Warfare Class, sometimes identified as Employee of the Month, has sent me an article which I guess, it's of interest, but it doesn't live up to the headline. But I thought I'd give you the headline just so you know where to file the story. It's the Green Bay Press Gazette, their piece by Doug Schneider, just so you know, intercepted, ! And Green Bay, they want to express everything in terms of interceptions. Why? Intercepted, how the feds wound up with 1,000 face masks meant for police in Brown County. Now, it's a nice local angle on things and explaining to people that the people refer to them as the Brown County's finest, the Brown County Police, ended up having their masks swiped away from them by the feds. I say it doesn't live up to its promise of its headline in a technical sense. It's not that it isn't an interesting story, and I love the local angle, and everybody should have one. Everyone should find out who the feds in their neighborhood are stealing masks from. But I say it doesn't live up to the promise of the headline because the headline says how the feds wound up with 1,000 face masks. What it tells us is that the feds wound up with 1,000 face masks meant for police in Brown County. But the how part is still a mystery. That is to say, long story short here, they hunted around, they found 1,000 masks, they ordered those 1,000 masks, and somewhere in between then and delivery, they got hijacked by some federal agency, but they don't know who or on what authority. That's typical story. They're no different from anybody else in that sense. But I was all excited when they said how it happened. But really the story was that it happened. They end up unable to identify who's got them and by what authority that worked and who told who what at what stage of the game. So we can't even tell. Once again, where in the process do these things get hijacked? I would love to know, what does the person who's able to walk away with those masks tell somebody whose job it is to ship it to the person who ordered it to make them change their mind? That's what I want to find out. And unfortunately, that's not in this article. And I don't think it's in any article. No fault of the Green Bay Press Gazette or Doug Schneider's or the Employee of the Month, for that matter. But I wanted to note that. We'll just add that to the logs of local stories saying, yeah, it happened to us too. All right. Here's another story, really custom made for our kind of show because it gets us the chance to say, wow, President Trump is such an asshole. And there it is. It has come and gone. The chance, we took advantage of it this time. Washington Post's report, I think we knew this was coming. This was hinted at earlier. I don't remember whether we actually mentioned it on the air. One of those things that could have passed for an Onion article until it actually happened. In unprecedented move, and really probably we might as well just say illegal move, but who's going to get prosecuted for it, right? Nobody. In unprecedented move, Treasury orders Trump's name printed on stimulus checks. Now, that's probably doing a great disservice to, he deserves it, I guess, but he may be doing a disservice to Steve Mnuchin and the rest of Treasury. And I think you can all read between the lines in that headline, too. Treasury orders Trump's name printed on stimulus check. Ultimately, when you check the records, you're going to see that Treasury is the one ordering this. But who do you think ordered Trump's name printed on stimulus checks? Trump ordered Trump's names printed on stimulus checks. Treasury passed on the order so that they didn't get fired. And I don't know whether the article reflects that, but let's spend a few more minutes complaining about the headline, shall we? Lisa Rein, R-E-I-N, I don't know if she's Rain or Reen or, Throat Warbler Mangrove for that matter. But there you go. That's credit. That's the way you get credit on this show. I don't know who you are. Here's the spelling of your name. I'm very sparing in my credit here. The Treasury Department has ordered President Trump's name be printed on stimulus checks the Internal Revenue Service is rushing to send to tens of millions of Americans. Rushing is a relative term as well. A process that could slow their delivery by a few days, senior IRS officials said. So think about how much is packed into this, just the first sentence. The Treasury Department has ordered it. Really, the president ordered the Treasury Department to order it. It's not the Treasury Department doing it. I mean, they're executing it, but Trump's making him do it. Has ordered the president's name to be printed on stimulus checks, right? So this stems from the original Almost Onion story that I heard, and I think I shared with you a few weeks ago, that Trump wanted his signature on the signature line of the check so that it looked like Donald J. Trump was paying everybody the money. I mean, it's a PR move, just as raw and naked as it could possibly be. He wants people to credit him personally with sending them the $1,200. The problems that arose are numerous. The least troubling, perhaps, of the bunch is that, as it happens, the President of the United States is not an authorized signatory for Treasury checks. So technically what you would be getting is a novelty check that, if banks were going to do their jobs, would not be honored and you wouldn't be able to cash them. This is not a legal signatory to a U.S. Treasury check. I cannot cash it. In all likelihood, I think the common practice now is that banks simply ignore everything that you're supposed to pay attention to. And when you're taught in law school, there was a course on this, on negotiable instruments. And the law is that the bank will say nope to that. And you kind of, I guess we're all supposed to hope that those things hold true, because otherwise if someone steals your checkbook and just scribbles on it in the signature line, the banks will give away all your money. But they will give away all your money. They do not care. Nobody looks at these things. So that's, I said, one of the least of the problems. The other problem, of course, is that it is an overtly political act performed with government funds and government resources, and would ordinarily violate the Hatch Act and a number of other things, except the president's immune from that. But this president is immune from everything because he won't let anyone arrest him. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's see, do we continue with this thing? Yeah, we can. Let me just take a quick side trip through the comments that have come in the last couple of hours at this point. I mentioned to you that Brian Monroe had mentioned that Skype is being phased out and replaced with Microsoft Teams, so we might want to get away from Skype anyway. In the meantime, Greg has found Skype working again and sent me a test message, and he passes the test. So for the time being, Skype will work, but maybe we're going to end up having to migrate at some point. I assume that they'll send us some inconveniently timed email telling us that we have X amount of time to migrate. And let's say we said to ourselves, well, to hell with that. Maybe we'll just get used to working with Google Hangouts instead. Well, screw you. You can't do that either. Darwin Darko sends us this note that basically, let's open it up again. Or do I already have it open? Okay. From 9to5google.com. which is a blog that has, things about Google in it. And I don't know whether this is about working at Google. I'm not certain. Doesn't matter. The real point here is that this article, which is from some time ago, December of 2018, back when we were dealing with COVID-18, I guess, if there was one, I don't know, says that 2019, which was last year, is your last year to use Google Hangouts Classic if you haven't moved on already, which I guess we had, but what were we supposed to move to? I guess they too are, they were going to pivot from the Hangouts brand to enterprise use cases. I don't know what the hell that means, but it doesn't matter. With Hangouts Chat and Hangouts Meet. What? So the writing has been on the wall for quite some time regarding the Hangouts consumer app's demise. Meanwhile, Google has transitioned to its consumer-facing messaging efforts to RCS chat and Android messages following Allo's misadventure. I missed the start of this article. I don't understand the background. I think what we're being told here is that that's going to be flushed down the toilet in favor of something else too. But I don't think, I think in both cases they're just offering you a different app, which may or may not look like the same thing, but I guess will work the same way, but probably be more annoying to figure out. But basically anything that we have settled on, our regular plan plus our backup plan, the geniuses of Silicon Valley have found out that these things work, and we will be redesigning them so that they don't later on. That's just sort of the way things work. And if you think it's a particular illness of Silicon Valley, I suppose, reconsider that once Republicans found out that social distancing worked, they wanted to get rid of that too. I guess it's just, sort of a widespread illness, maybe seasonal. So watch out for that. Now, back to the story about the egomaniac Donald Trump and the whole story packed into the first sentence of this piece. The Treasury Department has, quote unquote, they've puppet ordered that Trump's name be printed. Through no fault of his own, he was just sitting there minding his own business, being modest, when the Treasury Department decided, for dictatorial reasons, that President Trump's name should be printed on this check. Right. So problem number one, he's not a signatory of the check. He wanted to sign them, but they couldn't allow him to do it. And then guess what? That one actually stuck. His name won't appear on the signature line. And I'm astonished, quite honestly. Maybe it's just the combination of, one, technically banks shouldn't cash them because he's not an authorized signatory. And think about how problematic that would be if the president were personally able on his signature to remove funds from the Treasury. The Constitution's fairly clear about this. No funds shall be, drawn from the Treasury but by congressional appropriation. Though that doesn't explain exactly what's going on here because Congress doesn't sign the checks either. But usually it's the Treasury Department that has to deal with these things. In addition to which, in order to avoid the politicization of this process and of the Treasury itself, it is usually a nonpartisan civil servant of high rank that signs instruments of this nature. It's not usually even the Treasury Secretary, although you'll find the Treasury Secretary's signature, for instance, on our currency, but it's the Comptroller of the Treasury who has to countersign the things. And I don't know. I don't know when the last time I looked at the signature line of a government-issued check was, but it may be the Comptroller of the Treasury who handles those things as well. So, for various legal and constitutional reasons, his name can't appear on the signature line. There was also, I guess, the Hatch Act problem, but as we mentioned, the president is exempt from the Hatch Act. But generally speaking, this would be an overt political act and would likely be illegal. But again, in this administration, but not only can you can't, so far we still believe the memo from OLC that you can't indict the president, and therefore I guess you can't arrest the president. But this administration, really honestly, very few administrations would you find that the attorney general is like, arrest the president, go for it, I'll authorize that, or investigate, or whatever. You're just not going to find this administration declaring things that Trump does to be illegal. But at any rate, the combination of problems with it has convinced Trump that he can't order anybody to put his signature on the signature line. So what does he want to do? He wants to essentially fake it. Give me the next best thing. Isn't there another line on checks? Yes, there is. Does it appear at the bottom? Sure, it does. It's in the bottom left, not the bottom right, where the signature line goes. And just like a U.S. currency, now we're going to have two signatures on it. He wants to use the memo line of the checks for his name and or signature. It's not clear to me, wasn't clear to me last night whether they're putting one or the other or both. Maybe they'll stamp his signature on there and underneath it will say President Donald J. Trump underneath. This article made it a little bit unclear, but now we're ready for the second sentence of this article. Oh, no, we're not ready for the second sentence. We're still stuck on the first sentence. Just to reiterate that his insistence on doing this, of course, actually delayed the process, and they haven't printed the checks yet, or God forbid we find out they actually did print the checks but had to shred them all because he said, my name's not on this, we can't send these out. Start over again. But at any rate, there's the delay now of having to reset everything because, they have things set up to print government checks. It just doesn't say President Donald J. Trump on it in the lower left. Now we need a printing press plate or whatever they use these days in the digital age. Redo that so that it says Donald J. Trump on it because I'm orange and I want to see it. That's the reason. Now, on to sentence 2. The unprecedented decision, finalized late Monday, means that when recipients open the $1,200 paper checks, the IRS is scheduled to begin sending to 70 million Americans in coming days. The days are coming. We don't know when. They're coming. President Donald J. Trump will appear on the left side of the payment. It will be the first time the president's name appears on an IRS disbursement, whether a routine refund or one of the handful of checks the government has issued to taxpayers in recent decades, either to stimulate a down economy or to share the dividends of a strong one. Treasury officials disputed that the checks would be delayed. That tells you, of course, that the checks will be delayed. While some people receiving the checks, the centerpiece of the U.S. government's economic relief package to stave off the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, while some of those people may not care or observe whose name appears on them, the decision is another sign of Trump's effort to cast his response to the pandemic in political terms, which is a bad thing to do. But so what? Trump had privately suggested to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, when he wasn't sure whether it would be legal and could really, listen, Steven, I want you to do this. So he had privately suggested to Mnuchin, who oversees the IRS, of course, to allow the president to formally sign the checks, according to 3 administration officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly or sign checks, probably. But I take their word for it on this one, even though they're probably mostly liars because they work in the administration. But it's extraordinarily Trumpian thing to ask for, so I believe that it's true. But, as they go on to explain, the president is not an authorized signer for legal disbursements by the U.S. Treasury. It is standard practice for a civil servant to sign checks issued by the Treasury Department to ensure that government payments are nonpartisan. So, of course, he insisted on, find me a way to make them partisan. The checks will instead bear Trump's name in the memo line below a line that reads, Economic Impact Payment, the administration officials said, just so you don't forget what it is. The IRS will mail the checks to people for whom it does not have banking information. Many of them have low incomes. The checks will carry the signature of an official with the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, the Treasury Department division that prints the checks. The checks will follow direct deposits issued in recent days, allegedly, to the bank accounts of about 80 million people. Those payments do not include Trump's name because what would you do? Would you stamp it on the electronic ether that passes through the cables? I don't know. The decision to have the paper checks bear Trump's name, in the works for weeks, according to a Treasury official, was announced early Tuesday to the IRS's information technology team. The team, working from home, is now racing to implement a programming change that 2 senior IRS officials said would probably lead to a delay in issuing the first batch of paper checks. They are scheduled to be sent Thursday to the Bureau of the Fiscal Service for printing and issuing. So, of course, it's going to cause some delay. I mean, you'd think it would be a pretty quick thing. I just put my name on it. That's not such a big deal. But if he wants his signature, that's going to be, kind of a pain in the neck. And then, of course, there's always the possibility that he's saying, well, send me a sample of what it's going to look like first, and I'll tell you whether I approve of it or not. I want my name bigger. That could cause delays, too. We'll find out all about that in the book, forthcoming from I don't know who. Computer code must be changed, of course, to include the president's name, and the system must be tested, these officials said. Any last-minute request like this will create a downstream snarl that will result in a delay, said Chad Hooper, who was then dragged out and shot, or I guess is about to be. Sorry, Chad. Hope you're not listening. A quality control manager who serves as the national president of the IRS's Professional Managers Association. Well, too bad about that, and regrets to his family. A Treasury Department representative, however, denied any delay and said the plan all along was to issue the checks next week. Well, so what? I mean, that was the plan all along, but it's not happening. The economic impact payment checks are scheduled to go out on time and exactly as planned, except for this part. which this whole article is about. There is absolutely no delay whatsoever, the representative said in a written statement. That guy knows how not to be killed. Although he could have said that they already went out. That would have been better. First of all, he is a she. That's also good news. She said this was a faster process than the stimulus checks the George W. Bush administration issued in 2008 to head off a looming recession. Aha, we're better than him. In fact, we expect the first checks to be in the mail early next week. By the way, this is a quote about checks being in the mail. So, you tell me what you want to take this with. A grain of salt or what? Yes, we expect the first checks to be in the mail early next week, which is well in advance of when the first checks went out in 2008 and well in advance of initial estimates, the statement said. Now, if Kellyanne Conway were working for George W. Bush, she would sit there and say, how could it possibly be the case that checks issued in 2020 went out well in advance of checks issued in 2008? That is nonsense. But of course, we're talking about the amount of time it takes to implement the program. But Kellyanne Conway would have a field day with that one. An IRS representative referred questions to the Treasury Department. Okay. The paper checks are scheduled to be issued at a rate of 5 million checks each week until September, starting with the lowest income taxpayers. Makes a certain amount of sense. But yeah, so that's the dangerous thing. The checks are going to be in the mail next week. Well, some of them won't go out until September. But, whatever. So there's going to be people out there saying, what a bunch of liars, they said last week. But logistics explains the thing, but of course the spokesperson won't. You have to come to this show to find that. You don't have to come to this show to find out. You got to read this article. But apparently you probably have to come to this show to have somebody read the article to you, because I don't know how much traffic this one is getting. All the way down at the bottom anyway. The $2 trillion stimulus, the government's largest and most recent coronavirus rescue package, was passed by a bipartisan Congress, signed by the president, but he wanted his signature to be bigger, so it took longer. The checks to individual taxpayers were not originally Trump's idea, but he embraced them after Senators Josh Hawley and Mitt Romney proposed them. Did he propose? They couldn't have come up with the proposal of sending checks in general. Was it their idea that he sign them and put his name on them? Is that what they're trying to say? I doubt it. I mean, that's Trump's idea. It got to be, right? The idea of checks to individual taxpayers is like, well, that's how you give money to people. I'm not certain what you think you invented there. Josh, Mitt, Willard. The White House had initially floated a payroll tax cut as a centerpiece of its stimulus effort, but backed off that plan amid concerns it would not reach American households quickly enough, or at all, if it's a payroll tax cut. What if you don't have payroll? All right. Trump has repeatedly called the legislation a Trump administration initiative, and placed himself singularly at the center of what the government is doing to help Americans during the coronavirus response, taking full credit. Of course, he would do that. About 6 months before he faces re-election with his campaign on pause because the virus has prevented him from holding the rallies that are popular with his base, the checks provide Trump with a new form of retail politics. A check provides a touchable bread and butter symbol to taxpayers right in their mailboxes. Honestly, he should have done them Publishers Clearinghouse size and have people drive around delivering them. And in fact, I think Justice Putnam had the idea of, was it him? Dressing up. You want to save the Postal Service? Tell him that the Postal Service will dress up as, Publishers Clearinghouse style teams and jump out of vans and deliver the novelty checks that way. And that might make him happy enough to save them. 2 birds, 1 stone. But by the way, if you're killing birds, kill the other one first and don't worry about how many you get with the 2 stones. All right? Okay. But to critics and some IRS employees, many of whom started to learn of the decision on Tuesday, the presence of Trump's name on the checks reeks of partisanship in a corner of the government that touches all Americans and has, since the Nixon era, steadfastly steered clear of politics. Why since the Nixon era? Because in the Nixon era, they didn't steer clear of politics. They did terrible, terrible things in politics, and now Trump wants to do them again. After President Richard Nixon targeted a wide range of enemy groups for tax audits, including civil rights groups, reporters and prominent Democrats, Congress enacted laws. Oh, they were also part of the targeting. I read that wrong. But Congress enacted laws to ensure that the agency conducts itself apolitically. Take a look at those laws, by the way. What do any of them say about what happens to a president who ends that practice and instead conducts the Treasury's business politically? And the answer is, well, I don't know, probably nothing. And even if it does say something, who would enforce it? Whoops. So another one of those. We got the sad trombone moment, I guess, for that one. So good job on that one, Congress. So another post-Watergate reform that basically turned out to be Congress hereby declares that it would be really, really bad if a president did this. And, for 40, 50 years, presidents said, I don't want things that are really, really bad to be credited to me. And that was enough to stop them until President Trump. And you got to give him credit for this, right? Just because it doesn't go to anybody else. But he's the first one to realize, who cares if it's bad? I can steal all the money I want. And nobody can do anything about it. And that's the bottom line. Taxes are supposed to be non-political, and it's that simple, said Nina Olson, who stepped down last fall after an 18-year tenure as the National Taxpayer Advocate, leading an arm of the IRS that helps individual taxpayers resolve tax problems, manages clinics for low-income taxpayers, and advises the agency on service issues. Why would you step down? Because the president is a clown and you don't want to be associated with his regime. She says it's absolutely unprecedented. And of course, it's true except for the sort of precedent of Richard Nixon, but certainly signing the checks is. Even he didn't do that. She recalled that when the Bush administration delivered economic rebate checks of $300 to $600 to taxpayers in 2001 to share the benefits of a strong economy, the White House asked the IRS to include a letter to taxpayers. In the letter, include a sentence that took credit for, quote, giving you your money back. The IRS commissioner at the time refused, Olson recalled, because the move was perceived as too political. And, so they didn't do it. This is the last time it worked, I guess. When the Bush administration launched its $168 billion economic stimulus package in 2008, the checks were signed by a Treasury official. Only the IRS commissioner and general counsel are politically appointed. The current Trump-appointed commissioner, Charles Rettig, a tax attorney confirmed by the Senate in 2018, was appointed to a 5-year term designed to carry over into a possible new administration. Hooper, the president of the Professional Managers Association, we haven't spoken about him in a while, said he was appalled by what he called an abuse of government resources. In this time of need for additional resources, Hooper said, anything that takes our focus from getting those checks out the door and hampers the equitable, fair administration of the tax code is not something we can support. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has dismissed suggestions about Trump signing checks or having his name attached. Last week, she said the payments should go out as quickly as possible without waiting for Fancy Dan lettering from the president. Oh, interesting. Or waiting for a Fancy Dan letter from the president. I don't even think I'm even familiar with the term, but I get the point. About 150 million Americans and others are, that's interesting, and others are expected to receive the one-time payment. The first wave of recipients includes mainly people who filed the 2018 or 2019 tax return and gave the IRS their direct deposit information. They won't have their printed name on anything. Under the stimulus plan, single filers earning up to $75,000 a year. What do you want the details? Fine. $75,000 a year receive a payment of $1,200. Married couples earning up to $150,000 a year receive a payment of $2,400. Parents receive an additional $500 for each child under 17. And we're done. That does bring us to one other issue, though. I've been unclear to this point, and I'm still, I've read something that's pretty clear, but I still don't believe it, so I don't know what to tell you, and that's just a side effect of Donald Trump, I guess, being the president. But I guess up through yesterday in discussions with Joan, I had said, I had been repeating the reporting from earlier that we were all going to end up having to repay this stimulus payment anyway. The $1,200 or whatever it is that you eventually get was an advance on your tax rebates for next year. And to the extent that your tax rebate next year would have exceeded the amount that you're getting now, there will be a subtraction. Otherwise, I guess you just don't get your refund at all. I don't know whether it would carry over into other years, but as it turns out, even though I saw this written up in a number of financial reporting newsletters and trade magazines and general circulation magazines, and last, I think, in Forbes magazine, there's a counter to it out now, which may or may not be the most up-to-date information, but this is dated from Monday, so it's pretty good. Oh, and it's been updated since then, updated yesterday. Will you have to pay back the coronavirus stimulus check? Plus 6 other stimulus myths debunked, which sort of gives away the game. Alicia Adamczyk, maybe, is the last name on this one, Adamczzyk. And it is from CNBC, I guess most people would say, the least reliably nonpartisan arm of NBC, unless I guess if you're conservative, you would say that about MSNBC, but the least reliable to us arm of the NBC umbrella, but still. And they just say it outright. Myth number 2 on their list here is, the myth is, I will have to pay back the stimulus check next tax season. So it says here, assuming all the information on your tax return is correct, and it always is, you will not repay the check next spring. You may even receive more money when you file your 2020 taxes. While the checks are based off your 2019 or 2018 returns to get you money now, they are technically credits for 2020 taxes per the Tax Foundation. I'm still not entirely clear on how this works out, but if it turns out that you should receive a larger credit based on your 2020 adjusted gross income, then you will receive the difference next year. If a taxpayer's income drops in 2020, they'll be eligible for any remaining rebate credit that they were not able to claim using the 2019 or 2018 return, writes the Tax Foundation. On the other hand, you will not be penalized by the IRS if your 2020 adjusted gross income is higher than this year's, according to the Tax Foundation. That would be 2019, I guess. If the amount of a credit a taxpayer qualifies for in 2020 is less than it was based on their 2019 return, it does not have to be paid back. Well, you know what? That needs closer reading, quite honestly. I'm not exactly sure about the mechanics of it, but at least it's out there. It is a claim that, no, you don't have to pay it back. And at the very minimum needs to be thrown out there so that we can all be more confused about it and say that we don't know what the hell's going on. So, all right, well, that's out there. We'll see if we can't decipher it and figure out what it's eventually going to mean for people. I'm a little bit worried about that. One last thing I'll throw in here, even though I haven't got time to read the article, it might. I have a feeling, and I haven't checked yet, whether Justice Putnam is going to be covering this, but this feels like a story he may want to jump on. David Dayen, always on the lookout for a new scoop, and he's found another one, and here it is. Banks have been given the green light by regulators to take the $1,200 CARES Act payments and use them to offset an individual's existing debts. Isn't that great? Your wages, if you had them, could be garnished for your debts, but now if you have no wages, or even if you do, they will garnish your treasury check instead. So he printed this one up at the American Prospect. You can find it at prospect.org and read the full, read it and weep, I guess, if Justice doesn't read it to you first. But I don't know. I can't put it any simpler than that. There's a chance to claw this money back before it ever gets into your hands. Let's take a look and see, because Skype was working all day for Justice Putnam, what's coming up on his program for the day. Wait a second. We'll have to wonder aloud whether this is, in fact, today. I've got the Tuesday blurb for today. So So that puts you on notice. Dang. And here I had left plenty of time to tell you about what was coming up. Unless, let's see, is this a new blurb? Yeah, it is a new blurb. It just has the old heading to it. So good. Skip that. I screwed everything up. Now, Trump's dangerous attacks on the World Health Organization apply more to his initial virus response rather than to the health organization. That is, I think, obvious to everyone. For-profit icebox baby gulag is forcing asylum seekers to give up their rights if they want protections from the pandemic. You want a mask to protect yourself? Sign away your rights. Liberty University is getting sued, hooray, for not refunding student and campus fees while the school is offering online-only classes. That's going to be a huge problem for a lot of people. And a district court threw out Trump's rollback of school nutrition rules. Internationally, there's always exciting news there, too. Let's sum up some of these things. Maybe I can cram them in after this short message.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
All right, ready for the international news? A Chilean court upheld the conviction of former Pinochet aide Christian Labe, I'm guessing at that one, for torture in 1973. And Iraq suspended Reuters for 3 months for reporting the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country was higher than officially released. Wait till that happens here.